Unity of the Huachucas presents George McGaughey, LUT.
Take time to be holy.
Would you join me in a moment of meditation? And as we quiet our mind, focus in on those words we just sang. I am. I am. I am that I am. I give this to me this day. Say that with me. I give this to me this day. For Spirit is in my heart. And as we silence our mind, we dig deeply into that fountain of understanding. The fountain that will bring us forth with sizzling enthusiasm, the mighty war. But in this moment, concentrate on the I am of who we're about. Let silence surround you and encompass you and hold you like a mighty hug. And let us just relax in this moment. And in this moment, we have heard that small, quiet voice speaking to us. Let us have eyes to see and ears to hear, for it is what is ours to do this day. And so we do spring forth with a zeal and enthusiasm to go forth. And we say, thank you, Spirit. Amen, amen, and amen. Well, how many of you use a to-do list in life? Well, my to-do list sometimes gets longer than the roll of toilet paper in my bathroom. And I wish my cat would go play with this to-do list, much like he does the toilet paper. Heads and shreds and throws it all over the place. But I guess that's just wishful thinking. When I was working full-time, our sales manager would quote us and say, more heart attacks happen on Monday than any other day of the week. So enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your family. Enjoy life's vitality. He did because he had 12 children, but that's another story. And then just before we walked out the door, he would add, don't let your Monday ruin your Sunday. So I encourage you to do that today. Think about the present. Be present in all things. Now, our word for the month is vitality, and the dictionary describes it as a force of life or a force of strength, a physically or a mental force that has the capacity to produce or create things in me. Now, Unity's number one principle, and most of you probably know this, is God is all there is, present in everywhere. There is a force of love, much like gratitude and wisdom, that underlies all existence. Simply or put, God so there is only one presence and one power. By living in vitality, we live in the flow of giving and receiving, forgiving, letting go, letting God, and being grateful about it. Charles Fillmore, late in life, I would say in his late 80s, maybe even his early 90s, he did say what our affirmation says today. I fairly zizzle with enthusiasm as I spring forth a mighty faith to do the things that ought to be done. I'm hoping I'm 90 and can be able to say that with the same energy as Charles did. But Charles also said, zeal is the inner fire of the soul that propels us forward, regardless of our intelligent thoughtfulness or our self-control. But sometimes my get up and go has gone up and went. It's the procrastination that kind of holds me back. And for me, procrastination is the lack of focus. It's the lack of that inner focus to follow through. And sometimes I even postpone things and sit on the couch and watch an old Western. Or even stop my task for the lack of focus. Now, I don't know how many of you have one of these. It's called a GTI. It's a circle, and there's a reason for it's a circle. It's a get around to it. Amen. Now, I have that over my desk, and it's important that I do because it brings me back to focus. It brings me on to prayer. So sometimes before I even start my day, that's how I start, in prayer, and where it's things that I ought to be doing with enthusiasm and zeal. I'm reminded of a story my wife shared with me this morning, is not everything fits the way we think it ought to. Her mother, 100 years old in March, had bought a Camry back in the days. And it was the perfect car for her. It was a small, compact, and she parked it in her garage. There was plenty of room. You know, she was 60 years old, and you'd get it in there without banging up the fenders and stuff. But then she decided she wanted a new one. Well, lo and behold, Toyota had changed the size of their Camry, and now it was a mid-size, and it no longer fitted in her garage. So once she had bought it, tried it several times, she took it back and bought a Corolla. It fit perfectly. Isn't that sometimes what we do with thoughts? We think we have the right one, it fits in the garage for a while, and then it doesn't. We let go and let God. My pizzazz, I like that word pizzazz, for life, is sometimes hidden in the back of my mind. And I hate that when it happens. The car's not in the garage just right, it's at an angle, I banged a fender or something. However, like the pizza pie, I try to cut it in equal spots. That pizzazz doesn't always fit in everything the way I want it to. It still comes out in various sizes, shapes, and forms for life. No matter how hard I work to make it exactly the way I want my life's desires to be, sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. However, I keep retrying, repeating over and over and over again to make sure that it does. What's the definition for? Insanity. Want to have God have a good laugh at you? Tell him your intentions sometimes. She knows exactly what we want. And after I've gone through my prayers and voiced my thoughts for the day, I'll just laugh right out loud and say, I can appreciate that laughter, because that was not going to work. For me, zeal, however, is a measurement. It's how I measure my enthusiasm. Zeal, like the yin and yang of life, has a double influence. It has an influence about the outcome of how I approach life. The yang runs me full force into a project or into a problem, where the yang of life allows me to slow down, see things differently. If I ran headstrong into a project, sometimes I don't see the problems coming my way. I don't see the solutions like I think I could. However, if I use the yang of life, I slow down. I can sit in prayer. I might see things differently on the outcome of what is mine to do. If I sit in meditation, much like Charles does, I see the outcome differently very often. Unity's third principle is thoughts have creative powers to determine events and attract experiences. Ever just sit in the silence and say, what is mine to do? Things come to you. Or that third principle can be simpler put, thoughts held for 9 produce after their time. So if you're thinking a thought, guess what shows up? Now, there were 2 young grandchildren running through the Fillmore house back in the days, and they suddenly stopped. Charles was sitting quiet in his chair, and surprising one of them said, is he dead? No, the answer came from the other one. He's just meditating. Now, Charles would sit for hours in meditation before he started to do anything, before he started to write his weekly messages, before he would even start a book. And Charles wrote a lot of books. And so you can tell he would sit in meditation to try to find the answers for what he was supposed to be writing. And when asked a question he didn't feel like he could answer, he would say, I will take it to headquarters. That means I will pray and meditate on it. Now, last week I was sitting on the king's porcelain, the throne in my bathroom, contemplating the forces of life. It's a quiet spot. Sometimes the cat's with me, sometimes he's not. But the question arose, how does the body know to let go of the body's waste? I was thinking about and saying. Well, we get this easy feeling, this uneasy feeling, and the mind sends messages to the muscles in the body. And they work in harmony to tighten and squeeze back and forth and finally releasing. And soon the waste of the body disappears. But it all starts in the mind. When I open my mind to limitless possibilities, nothing is impossible. That's a quote from Luke 1:37. There are no limits to what my mind can imagine on its own. I might find it challenging, too big to overcome, or too pivotal to work. In my past, however, I might have avoided such challenges, but nowadays, I turn within for guidance. Within my inner sanctuary, I find endless possibilities for God in me. Nothing can be impossible. As a spiritual being, I open my mind to those possibilities of life so they can enter my imagination. I've got a vivid imagination, as an Irishman used to call it. With spiritual insight, I begin to apprehend what is possible. I emerge from my prayer time filled with visions and clarity, ready to take those necessary steps to make my vision a reality. Have you ever thought about someone and all of a sudden you get a phone call and it's them? Or you come up with the next great idea for life and it's the next great invention, then you turn on the TV and somebody's already beat you to it. Well, Charles said that's our way of tapping into the ethos of life. There's energy constantly flowing around us. And then when we sit in quiet meditation, it's easier to tap into that. Because then we begin to hear that small quiet voice. Years ago, I took a class on open eye meditation. It really improved my ability to listen to people. Because if you can meditate with your eyes open, you see life coming at you differently. I was in a doctor's office not too long ago for my monthly checkup. And I stepped on the scales. And to my embarrassment, I was surprised to see that my weight had blossomed to 204 pounds. And so I joked with the nurse's aide and said, why don't you just take off that last 4? She quietly notated something in my chart, and in a few minutes she left, and the doctor came in and he says, as he flipped through the charts, he says, I see you lost some weight. You're down to 20 pounds. How do I keep my zest flowing in life? It's really easy. It's by releasing and letting go. Understand what's in my garage at the time. What things are serving me? For me, life is a movie. And if I can see the moving parts, I can interpret those things metaphysically, going beneath and understanding what is mine to do and what life is about. There was a young man who frantically called the hospital and said, my wife is having a baby, and my wife is having a baby. He was screaming at the person at the other end of the phone and said, she's She's dilating. And she's ready to go. There was silence on the line. The doctor answered and said, "Is this your firstborn?" "Hell no, stupid. This is her husband." Sometimes we need to be holy to listen to each other. Because what we've said is not always what we meant. Or we need to take time to understand what we're saying and what life's all about. We need to find our zeal for life in the bottom of that fountain. Let it spring forth, like Charles said, with enthusiasm, with a great deal of trust and understanding what is ours to do. And the only way you're going to know about that is if you take a moment to be in silence and focus on that. Taking time to do that, in that moment, we truly find ourselves. And that's what holy is all about. Thank you for taking time to listen this morning. I hope you have ears to hear and eyes to see. Take it forth with a blessing of understanding from which it is given. Thank you for being here.